Hey y'all, grown black folks talk. Uh, Mr. and Mrs. Daystar Peterson are a thing. I was minding my own self business. Y'all saw a video that I made yesterday. Well, actually, y'all usually see videos that I made yesterday, but I made a video yesterday on the climb about where love is really, but we put black on it afterwards. We need to get some things defined first, where it is and from whom it withdraws itself, and talking about the nature of love because of subscriber comments about where is black love anyway? Does it just exist in America? What are we working with? Because I'm not seeing it where I am. And after that conversation, I got back to the house after my walk, and Pam Esquire, the law intellect, I'll put the video in the description, has disclosed the information that the title reads, Tory Lanez, his wife. I'm like, wait, what? Say what now? Say what now? Since he has been sentenced, which was not that long ago, to the present day, he has gotten married. And he has married the mother of his 6-year-old son. And she wrote a letter to the court about, coming up to his sentencing. Now, when I made my video about that, there were 70. Black woman minding my business corrected me in the comments. There were 76. Pam Esquire, the law intellect, today put out a number of 79 letters. I have to be careful. Someone may have said it in her comments, actually. 79. So the number is in the 70s, and we know that. But she probably presented the most heart-wrenching letter because she talked about how her son is being affected by his father not being in the home, how he misses his father and cannot possibly understand. I mean, he was with his father all through the court cases, saw him every day, and then suddenly that stopped. So you look at it from the perspective of the child. And this is also why I'm not here to ridicule Mr. and Mrs. Daystar Peterson. But I do want us to examine it in light of what we have just discussed about the 5 stages of grief and about the definition of love, as in love exists in balance and in communication and in partnership with justice and righteousness. And where justice and righteousness exit, love goes with it. Love is unconditional, justice and righteousness are not. And I want us to kind of think our way through this for just a moment, because there's what appears on the surface, there's what appeared in the bond documents, and Pam Esquire, the law intellect, read the documents on the show, and it was originally reported on by Megan Kuniff, now known as Megan the Reporter, who also is involved with the courts in the sense of reporting on what happens. So she was reading the documents, and let's back up. Let's back up. On the surface, we want men to take responsibilities for the families they have created and honor, I mean, just generally, stop making single mothers, meaning you marry the mothers and keep up with and support that family. That was the whole point of shotgun weddings going back a long time ago when Black people had a community that was cohesive. You knew that if you got a woman pregnant, her family was going to come get you. You were not going to leave that burden on the community, even if you had to be threatened. And you also knew that father, brother, and uncles, you better not mistreat her, because that was not going to go well for you. So, and that also took place in other communities also. The idea is if you make the family, you're responsible. This is why in the scripture, a man was never allowed to divorce a woman that he had had sex with. He wasn't stoned outright for having done it. He was never allowed to put her away. She became his obligation. Now, from our perspective, we think about the terms of how dare God make this woman stay with this man, because we think this woman had other options. She did not. She was no longer a virgin. She was never going to be married but to another man. Her father and mother were eventually going to die, and she was going to have nothing, because in most cases, not all, because the Bible, Mosaic law, does contemplate daughters inheriting, but in many cases, she wasn't going to have anything. She was going to be held as a disgrace in the culture that they were in. Early Aramaic Egyptian differed, but Hebraic culture comes out of Ur of the Chaldees, out of the Aramaic culture of that time. So if this man did not follow through and take care of her, and there were very strict laws about how he had to treat her, she was going to be. This is why later on there is a grape that happens, and the woman said, "Putting me away and sending me away is a worse injustice than what you have done to me," because there was no backup plan. It was known, no, all the way back there, that what you were supposed to do if you want to have sex with a woman, you want to be her husband. So on the surface, it looks like this falls in line with Tory Lanez doing his prayer groups and doing the right thing and choosing to marry the mother of his child. And we understand making her a wife instead of a baby mama. And from her perspective, given the contents of her letter, we can understand Miss Peterson. If she is black and we don't know her ethnicity, but she was acclimatized like many of us. She's no longer valuable as a single mother. You see how ancient and archaic this thinking is, though, when I mentioned ancient Aramaic Code of Hammurabi type stuff. You see how archaic this is? That she has no value as a single mother, and that not having the father in the home, and that no one's going to want to be a stepfather because real men don't do that. She's heard all that same stuff. By the way, shout out to Love Up Single Mom. It's a very, very powerful channel. And Level Up Single Mom has a very, very powerful book about regaining your dignity. Her name is Kiana Footman. And if you look at, I gotta go on Amazon and find it so I can put it in the description. She has a very powerful book called Level Up Single Mom about regaining your dignity as a single mother. We don't know if Miss Peterson has read that book, but if someone would get me her information, well, it's a little late now. And I'm not gonna meddle in a marriage, actually. If someone had just gotten me her information ahead of time, though. But we know that this probably did not happen. So, on the surface, for her, this looks like the best option available. And I will say, on behalf of this child, the best outcome that he can think of at 6 years old is having his own dad, with whom he was very close. Sometimes, uh, uh, if the child is very close to his own father, sometimes introducing a stepfather is not going to work anyway, sometimes. So, Mrs. Peterson looked at her options, and this looked like the best to her. Okay? So, on the surface, we're inclined to think of this as a true love story. The stand by your man crowd, the black men who want ride or dies, of course, is probably very happy about this. Because Tory Lanez is a convicted felon with a 10-year term ahead of him. But she loyal. She actually went on and committed to him. So, if you have never really started to question the assumptions about the value of women and their intrinsic value, whether or not they are connected to some man, whether or not they have a child or not, then this may sound like a good love story, highly unusual. You may be inclined to give Tory Lanez credit for, he is truly reformed and he's doing the right thing, including marrying the mother of his children. And then when you got past the headline on Pam Esquire Law Intellect, you find out that this marriage is part of his lawyers attempting to file a motion for him to be out on bond until his appeal. Tory Lanez is Canadian. So, by definition, he theoretically is a flight risk, although Canada has extradition laws with the United States. But see, the assumption is it's a state crime of only 10 years and he would be deported anyway. So, technically, he's a flight risk. But his whole family, well, the major members of his family are in Los Angeles. And by getting married and committing to his wife and his son, he is attempting to show in his bond documents that he is not going to be moving around. He is committed to staying. And his lawyers mentioned correctly that while he was out on bond previous to trial, he did his events and came back to Los Angeles. There was never a case where they had to go and get him. Now, he was violating his bond every other day on social media by harassing Megan Thee Stallion and having his little friends do it. But in terms of physically violating his bond, he never did this. except for that one case when allegedly he beat down a gentleman by the name of August Alsina, and that's what got him put on house arrest. So I'm sitting here like, you just thought we were going to just kind of ease past the fact that a man who was already going to be on trial for a violent incident just happened to go out just a mere 2 years later, knowing he was on trial for a violent incident and beat down another man. But somehow we just supposed to just let that slide by. Is this what we doing in these internet streets? Is this what we do in the legal streets? So it appears from looking at the legal strategy that the marriage is another attempt for Tory Lanez to show that he is committed to his life in the United States of America. Now, someone in the comments mentioned that he's probably trying to get a green. They should have gotten married so he could get a green card because as a convicted felon, you can forget that. It's too late. Even if he was released on bond, is his visa going to hold up? He might be deported and then we have to return to do trial. You got U.S. Marshals, but probably again it's a state crime. That's probably not going to happen. But that is a little that kind of strategy is a little late because you know what you do is you marry a U.S. citizen and then apply for citizenship. Your child is a citizen. You just go ahead and do that. You're not going to have any trouble passing the citizenship test. You already speak English, so you're going to be able to do this easy if you do things the right way. It's another video, but doing things and understanding the prevailing laws where you live and doing things forward instead of backwards is kind of important in a case like this, but that's a different video. So at this point, we see that this marriage is another way of showing he's committed to staying and seeing this through. So it would appear that Mrs. Peterson was willing to go along with this in order to bolster her husband's case. Because again, we know what her thought process is. Her thought process is she does not seem to have a firm sense of what's good for her because she doesn't think she can do better. She's looking at what's best for my son. What's best for my son is to have his father. And I get that. But here's the deal. Well, there's two deals. Men who are unstable and committing brutally violent acts on men and women within a 2 year span, who have drinking problems, probably do not make for a stable husband. I would say that Tory Lanez is probably a good example of the choose better phenomenon. I hate to be like that, but I have to be like that. That's a choose better. If he's anybody else, I hope this is obvious to my listeners. It may not be obvious to anyone, but if I don't get anything across to you, probably a convicted felon is not a good choice for a husband, father, or stepfather. That's just not generally a good thing. Although I have on this channel celebrated men who have truly come to Christ and have truly changed their lives and have truly become good family men. And Tory Lanez may be the exception to the rule. I don't see if there's enough evidence yet because he's doing everything he can to get bonded out on appeal. I don't think there's enough evidence. These are men whose lives I've been able to examine for 20 or 30 years that I celebrate. 6 months, not so much. No, no, no. Mm-mm, mm-mm. But I could be wrong. It's possible. The thing about being a Christian is that you have to leave room for what God does. So the Bible does say, by their fruits ye shall know them. And it takes usually a whole year to see what a tree is going to do. So I don't have enough evidence for me, but that doesn't mean that perhaps something has not occurred. You know, he's had time to just sit there and be in prison and realize he's going to be there. And maybe it's possible. But at the same time, if on paper, if that's the setup, I don't care. We already talked about quote unquote good Christian men that don't respect themselves, they mamas or God. We talked about this on this channel. That's a no. That's an absolute no. But because Miss Peterson does not see that she can do any better for herself or her son, she's going to go along with this. So at the second layer of this, we look at this is a big bond scheme. Appeals can take as much as 2 years. So in essence, from Ms. Peterson's perspective, if he gets out on bond and he wins his appeal, then his son has his father all the way through, which is the best possible outcome from Ms. Peterson's perspective. However, if he does not succeed in getting his bond, but eventually wins his appeal, okay, he's only lost maybe 1 to 2 years. Okay, fair enough. That's better than having him gone for the whole 10. But the reality is, Pam Esquire, the law intellect, talked about the reality of the case. Unless there is some amazing new evidence that nobody has seen, or we can, we can look at were his lawyers just that incompetent? That's sometimes a basis for an appeal. That's basis for an appeal. If there's amazing new evidence, that's what's called exculpatory, that would prove his innocence, there could be a new trial. But if neither of those things happen, Mrs. Peterson has gone from a single mother to a married single mother. And what this means is her son is still going to grow up being damaged by the fact that his father is a convicted felon serving time. It also means that 10 years down, and what it says in the bond, she's living very close to his family. Now we know his father, Sunstar Peterson, can get completely out of pocket and out of control. So this is what Mrs. Peterson has now attached herself to, because she does not realize she can do better. You have a man convicted of violent crimes against a Black woman. You have a father that's out of pocket, so that's the grandfather of your son. And you're going to have a son who already is not responding well to his father being away. So you're going to have a teenage, nearly grown boy who is going to have to try to adjust to this in Los Angeles, which means you're going to be around people, you're going to be bumping into people at school that know all about this. So she's not going to have one potentially dangerous man to deal with in 12, 15 years. She's going to be dealing with three. And one of these three men has already shown that if he flips out and feels disrespected, he will attempt to hurt you. And she's married to him. And then we have to look at, is this love? Because love does not move without justice and righteousness being attached. Love and desperation are not the same. If Miss Peterson felt like she had a better option for her and her son, would she do this? If she believed she could find a supportive community of Black women, a traditional Black community that would receive her and support her, would she do this? If Black men were not so adamant about their foolery, about not wanting to be stepfathers, and about single mothers being essentially worthless except for sex, would this woman feel like she had options? If more aunties could have got to her in time, if Kiana Footman, Level Up Single Mom, had got to her in time, would she have? And of course, this is not possible in 18 million people. Well, why are we discussing it? Because, ladies, there is no way. I don't care what the manosphere has to say. Go look it up online. You can Google this. The percentage of Black men who are convicted felons, 30 to 33%. Go look it up. And we can talk about how many of these are unjust convictions. Many people believe that Tory Lane's conviction is unjust. We're not going to argue that here. And we can talk about, and I've had male Black men supporters flip out and get mad and be all this and all that, talking about they leaving the channel and got the doors blessed, blocked, and changed the locks after them because of the foolery. Flip out on my page one time. That's it. I don't care who you are, man, woman, child, or beast. It's entirely up to my discretion whether you ever speak here again. But I understand, because we do know there's injustice, and we know that the man who created the last 30 years of injustice with his friend Jefferson Beauregard Sessions and had his friend Bill Clinton sign off on it, is the 46th, as the our auntie clip, 46, not 45. The 46th president of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden, is responsible for that. The last 30 years or so, from 1993 onward. Yeah, we know that. So when you look at those numbers, we have to also consider, as I know men who are convicted felons who have nonetheless have changed their lives and are doing amazing things. Jesus is real, y'all. What he can do for a man, and when Jesus runs that redemption program and a man decides to submit to the program, he can become the most amazing family man. I know a convicted felon who knows the Lord and is holding prayer groups and bringing his relatives to church and talking about, no, it's time for y'all to come to the Lord. Enough of the foolery. You coming up out of this. This man is changing the San Francisco Bay Area and across the country now. So it can happen. When Jesus runs that redemption play and you choose to go ahead and run the play with him, it can be amazing. So we'll go ahead and we will look at that big number, 1 in 3 of Black men. And we will apply some nuance because that's fair. But see, again, Miss Peterson, from her own letter, she's in desperation because she can't handle her son. She said it. He's acting out and she doesn't know what to do with him or how to help him. And to her mind, the only help is his father. So she has done this desperate thing and married this convicted felon who took pleasure in harming another Black woman, who took pleasure in harming another Black man. To hear allegedly, to hear August Alsina tell it, allegedly. Who, if he is allowed out on bond, his followers, perhaps even without his direct influence, will resume their tormenting of Megan Thee Stallion. I've seen some comments about this recently, about how these men are out here talking about her career is going to be over. We're going to stop it. Well, you know what? Megan Thee Stallion has a documentary coming out about her life right now. Megan Thee Stallion is moving forward. She's very young to have a whole documentary, but she's got a whole documentary coming out. And she's very much alive. She's young, she's beautiful, she's talented. Megan's going to find a way. She's not the one that's going to be locked up for the next 10 years. She doesn't have to appeal nothing. But see, if that's the situation with Tory behind bars, what's going to happen when he gets out? Interestingly, in the bond documents, part of the conditions for the bond is that he will not be allowed to harass the plaintiff on social media. And Pam Esquire said something very important. It would have been better if his lawyers had convinced him of that before his conviction. And whatever mess that would occur, should he forget to do that, Mrs. Peterson and their son, because they are now married, are going to be ground zero when the smack goes down. They're either going to be at ground zero as this man serves his sentence and his son, who already is having difficulty. Maybe Mr. Sunstar Peterson will calm himself down and step up. There are some wonderful grandfathers who, when confronted with this reality, they do that. They do that. I know I'm on air and off. Sir Walter Jones is a grandfather doing the darn thing. I always give him credit for that. He's a grandfather doing this darn thing with his grandson. I know some neighbors. I know some people that, as grandfathers, are doing the darn thing. Sunstar Peterson may step up. I hope so. I hope that outburst that we saw with the foolery after Tory was convicted, I mean, to give him all the credit in the world. If my son was convicted and I didn't believe he was guilty, I suppose I might flip out too. And y'all know, if I was going to flip out, the fliptitude would be on 1 million. So I'm gonna give Sunstar Peterson that much grace because I probably would flip out the same way if I knew that I knew that I knew that my son was innocent, or if I was just deluded. Whatever the case may be, yeah, if I got oratory powers, I'm gonna use it. Absolutely. So I'm gonna give him that much grace. He did apologize to the court. And so maybe there's a reasonable man here underneath that we overlooked. He is not to be blamed either for Tory's behavior so much as we also know that Tory struggled, at least as far as the story we've been able to, because of the loss of his mother. And that would mess a lot of people up. Now, he chose to cope with it through alcohol, which is his choice. That was his choice. And he was drunk when he did what he did to Megan Thee Stallion, presumably. So Sunstar Peterson may have more reasonable characteristics than we know about, and he may step up for his grandson. To me, this would be the happiest ending possible in terms of if Tory Lanez or Mr. Daystar Peterson had to serve out his sentence, but his father is able to step up with his son. That gives that family a chance. And that is what I'm going to be praying for. Because the other side of this is I know that it could become a hot mess. I know that because of the nature of how Black men even treat the mothers of their children oftentimes. How there was no thought of marriage till he needed to do a bond hearing. How this man flips out and does serious bodily harm to other people. He's got to do 10 years in prison. Do y'all understand what this man, well, he's a celebrity, so they're probably not going to let him mingle with the general population, which is fortunate for him. You understand the abuse that this man could experience in prison? Otherwise, and Miss Peterson got to deal with a father that's going to back his son no matter what, because Sunstar Peterson doesn't care about August Alsina or Megan Thee Stallion. He's just going to roll with it. He believes in his son's innocence, even though all kind of evidence, all you got to do is go on social media and find out his son is hardly innocent. But he going to roll with it. So you got Sunstar Peterson, Daystar Peterson, and a big teenage boy who's angry at the world. And in Black male culture, will be encouraged to take that out on who? His mama. And even the good Black Christian men, like, Kojo from Little Black Book and the Terrence R. Whitfield from Dear Future Wifey, are still going to back him up on that. Because, good Christian men are having shows where they allow other good Christian men to dishonor their mothers and talk about their mothers at their lowest moment live for their thousands of subscribers. And this is the situation that Ms. Peterson has married herself to. And there's nothing we can do about it. I am mentioning it, though, because I want you to see. Love and desperation are not the same. Love does not exist where injustice and unrighteousness are reigning. People are innocent until proven guilty, presumed innocent until guilty. Tory Lanez has been convicted. That ought to take that off the table for any woman who's interested in love in the presence of righteousness and justice. Serve your time, pay your debt to the state of California for what you did. And in 10 years, if I ain't got nothing better to do, maybe. But here's the deal. You also can do better than a convicted felon with violent offenses. You can do better than that, ladies. If you meet a man later down the line and you can see evidence that he's reformed his life, that's different. But marrying these men who are in prison and just coming out and in the recidivism cycle and going back and have not changed their trifling evil ways, you can do better than that even alone. In the previous video, I talked about many of us are living in communities that are being gentrified out of existence because love exits and so does the protection for the community. You need to understand that even being alone is doing better than being with a violent felon. I don't know why this is so hard to understand, but I do know why this is so hard to understand. I was walking down the street in the Fillmore in my late teen years, and a couple men wanted to try to impress me by telling me how many felonies they had. And apparently that must have been working on someone. I was absolutely horrified. My father is honorably discharged Air Force veteran. I do not deal with felons who are still bragging about their felonies. And yes, I took the uppityness into my voice to make a point. It's not that I look down my nose at other people. It's just that the standards that I was programmed with are higher than that. But I realized not every black woman has had that opportunity because their mothers were desperate and their fathers were wicked. So many black women have to figure it out as they are going, and sometimes that's an imperfect process. I get it. I get it. Mrs. Peterson has made her decision. I pray that it be well with her and her son. And for their sake, because they are married now, because he's married to her, and for her sake, and because Sunstar Peterson is now the father-in-law, I can pray for all of them. Actually, not that Daystar get out on bond. No, sir, don't. What was it, Beretta? For those of you who are a little bit older than watch it, was it Beretta? Beretta? Don't do the time. Let's see. Don't do the crime. If you can't do the time, don't do it. Don't do the crime. If you can't do the time, don't do it. I think that was Beretta. One of my mom's repeats. Yeah, I remember that. We just be snapping. But I was programmed real young. If you do the crime, we are not coming to get you. You gonna do the time. We ain't paying for lawyers. We ain't going your bail because we raised you better than that. Now, whatever happens, it's up to you. I was programmed young. So my idea is, man, you got convicted and there ain't no evidence that you innocent. So do the time and come to Jesus, the real one, and get your life together. It's unfortunate for Daystar Peterson. He's named the Daystar. So many of these old men naming their children after the Messiah as if that's gonna work. Now, so get to know Jesus, the real one, and get your life together and come out and put your work in, showing that you're a changed man. You sincerely apologizing to Megan Thee Stallion, admitting what you did, admitting you were wrong and you had no business doing that, wouldn't hurt. And then do all that, and then Tory Lanez will be about 40. Build your family up, sir. I know men have successfully done it. I will pray for that because of Mrs. Peterson and her son. That this man serve all of his time, and that son starts step up and become a good grandfather because of that little boy. I have faith in God that He can make anything happen. But I also understand that because God has allowed mankind free will, He sometimes will allow us to do things that are not to our good. We trying to have His spot. We trying to do it our own way. Oh, okay. And unfortunately, Mrs. Peterson and her son are now, like I said, married to this process. Depending on, the state of California is not likely to let a young black man go if it can help it. They get 10 good years of work. He can be on the fire lines every single year. Fortunately, we haven't had a huge fire yet this year. Well, no, I don't knock on wood. I will pray about that as well. That is such a good song, though, about I better knock on wood, though. But no, no, not over here. But he could be put out on those fire lines and die out there for the next 10 years, or at least 9. I know he's got some credits. Anything can happen. He needs to have that experience. But I'm gonna pray for her, and I'm gonna pray for her son. And I will pray that Sunstar can make sure his life is together so he can be a good grandfather. And when Tori gets through this experience, he is truly repentant. And in being truly repentant, they can then make things as right as possible with Megan. There may be some conditions about him contacting her afterwards. And then do right by his wife and his child. That's the best we can do with that 10 years from now. I can't say I'm happy about finding this out, but it's also not under my control. I'm not here to mock Mr. and Mrs. Daystar Peterson. What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. And as kind as we can be about it, is that God has a purpose in what looks like legal foolery. That Daystar Peterson is using another black woman to his ends with that bond thing going on. And that she is going along because she's desperate. That's what it looks like from here. And that's why I'm not happy about it. And that's also why I'm talking about it, to let us know most of the times that on paper, that ain't it. Ladies, by yourself, you can do a better job than a violent felon. And you do not need every man, first of all, you do not need every man to love you, single or with a single mother. You don't need every man to love you. What you need to do is do the work to heal yourself and do the work you need to do to get into better environments where there are men willing to do the job. That's what you have to do if you want your child to have a male figure to look up to who will actually guide him in the right path. If you don't believe you can do it alone, then you need to look past an entire culture of men who wants to make chattel of the black women and children. Tory Lanez did not have his son in court because he wanted the son to be close to him. He wanted that son there to influence the jury and the judge. That failed. So it looks like he on to plan number two. That if that is the case, that's a chattel maker in a chattel maker culture. You can do better than that. Many women have. I know black men get really upset when black women have other colors of men raising their sons and their sons growing up to talk about how this man was a father to me. I know this is upsetting. But mama, whether you do it alone or you do it outside of a toxic culture, you have to understand that you deserve better. And so does your son. Than marrying yourself to an out of control violent felon. You can do better. You need better. You're worth better. You have the right to choose better because love does not attach itself to unrepentant men who harm women. That has nothing to do with justice nor righteousness. Love does not attempt to interfere when justice is being carried out on someone who has harmed another human being. When Tory Lanez shot Megan Thee Stallion, he committed a crime against humanity because Megan is human. He deserves all of that 10 years, and it could have been 14, and it could have actually rolled all the way 22. And if he had gotten 22 years, he would have deserved all 22 years. A human being has an eternal soul. When you do a crime against another human being, you are doing a crime that resonates throughout eternity. And you need to have your son raised by yourself understanding that and how no one has the right to harm you so that your son sees that's not an option for him as a man. And if you're going to have men in his life, he's going to need to have men in his life that understand that doing crimes against women is a crime with eternal consequences and punishments. Women are half the human race. The African woman is, we have proven it scientifically, the mother of the human race. You need to raise your children yourself and understand it. And then around, if there are going to be men involved at all, around men that understand that they are not allowed to just hurt some human being with an eternal soul because they drunk, stupid, ugly, and mad, and under 5 foot and under 6 feet tall and mad, and not as talented and mad. And because that woman could walk away and mad. You connecting yourself with the foolery is not love. It may be desperation, it may be codependency, it may be not seeing other options. I'm telling you, any option is better than that. Because a man who can do that to a woman that supposedly he's not sleeping with, that's just a man who can do that to his friend, but can also do it to his wife and can do it to his child. I'm not in Mrs. Peterson's situation. I don't know what she's going through. And from her point of view, what she did, and from the point of view of many Black people in a community that's perishing, that looks like love. I'm here to question it and cause you to question it by virtue of what we already discussed today. I would not have you, as the Bible says, to be ignorant. We gotta find some brighter subjects, and we will. Um, Love is always a bright subject, but understanding the limitations because love is in balance all the time with justice and righteousness can be hard in a community and in a country that does not want to acknowledge that. It sets up cognitive dissonance. It sets up the 5 stages of grief. And then we have our Black love stories like the Petersons. And we cannot then sit and enjoy this triumph of love because we actually have to use our critical thinking. And we have to understand this is not a correct model for our life activities. And like I said, I'm gonna say this one more time. There is an exception to the rule. If a man who is a felon has fruit that he has changed his life, you don't need a couple of years of fruit now. Tory has done his best to show fruit. All of a sudden, he had 3 years to show all this fruit and didn't bother to turn up all this till he got convicted. But for people who have years of fruit, like before they about to get sentenced, like after their sentence and they're not about to go back, the fruit shouldn't be in the drawer somewhere, breeding the fruit flies and then getting pulled out at the end when some judge, some white man basically needs to make a decision. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about fresh fruit that is growing on a tree of a life that has been redeemed. If you don't see that, because look, y'all, I hate that we have to go here so often, but I need you to understand the stakes of the game. When your community is engaging in a lot of activities that don't tend to this, but tend to this, we got to talk about these things as they are. Y'all have a good day now. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.